Okay, cool.
I can share my screen.
Yes, you can.
All right. Okay, so I will be talking about, like I mentioned earlier, identity work and therapy. So I'll just be going over the introduction, some theoretical foundations. So where did identity work come from? And like I said, I will also be going through some different techniques that we can use in therapy, and then some challenges and ethical considerations to maybe just look out for when we are doing this type of work. So I just wanted to start off with this quote by Carl Jung. Your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams, and who looks inside awakens. So I just thought this would be this is a powerful quote because oftentimes people forget to look in, to access their core self. People tend to view themselves just by the stories that they hear about themselves and things of that nature. So it's important that we kind of look internally and try to, again, access that core self. Okay, so introduction. So, real quickly, the definition. So, identity work in therapy involves helping clients understand, explore, and integrate the various aspects of their identities to foster self-awareness, acceptance, and growth. Sure, that sounds familiar to many of you. As you know, redecision therapy, I've realized, is very closely associated with identity work as well. Um, the goal is to empower clients to align their internal self-concept with their external expression and relationships. And there are three integral parts to this work. So, first one being empowerment. So, when we examine and reclaim that lost part of us, um, therapy can empower individuals to increase self-confidence and authenticity. The second part being integration. So this is where identity work helps the individuals merge those conflicting aspects of their identity to create a more harmonious sense of self. And the last one being healing, which is, oftentimes, as we know, when we address those trauma that we kind of suppress, or the struggles tied to one's identity, can lead to that emotional healing and overall healthier self-concept. Um, so I have a really great interest in identity work because I come from a collectivistic culture, and so the first time I went to undergrad, I had traveled away from home, and that's when I was involved with, I guess you could say, the individualistic culture, and I found myself having a lot of hard time just managing those two sides of I guess you could say, my life. So an example being, for me, like, family is a huge thing, and a lot of the values that come from family is quite different to what I experienced in undergrad. And so I was having a hard time understanding certain things. So one example is drinking alcohol, for example. I couldn't drink alcohol, obviously, because it's not something that's prohibited in my culture. But then when being exposed to a different culture where alcohol was obviously not prohibited, I kind of felt those pressures to, I guess you could say, kind of blend in with the crowd. And so I often did some things that might have been not acceptable. And a lot of times I would feel this internal conflict of, like, okay, am I doing something bad? Am I not doing something bad? Am I just trying to fit in with the group? So a lot of this kind of, made me think a lot. And it took me quite a bit of time to finally go to therapy and try to understand this myself. And I remember the first time I actually attended therapy, my therapist told me something which I felt, again, very empowered by. And she just mentioned, what would it look like for you if you could just coexist in both cultures? And that, to me, I was like, well, I never thought about that. That's something that can actually help me live a healthier lifestyle. And so that's where my interest started to come is to really explore how individuals can become their truest selves. Can they coexist in two different worlds? Um, and so I started to learn about identity work. I started to learn about these different parts of self, and I realized, yeah, maybe I can coexist, and in a healthy way. And after I kind of reconciled that with myself, I felt really, again, empowered to help other people dealing with similar struggles. And especially this type of work came about during my work with university counseling. I had a lot of students who kind of dealt with many similar challenges where they kind of had to either uh, kind of same thing with family values and trying to manage those and at the same time manage academics. And so um, coming in with that background, it really helped me help others as well. So I'm really glad that I went through that experience because now I could understand it when other people come in with that same presentation. And also coming into ACA, I think redecision therapy has been something that I've really had huge interest in as well. So, going through the theoretical foundation. So, identity work actually draws from many theoretical frameworks, and these theories can actually help clients explain how these identities form, how they evolve over time, and how they can be redefined. Um, I I found these four theories that kind of use identity work or where identity work came from. So the first one being the psychoanalytic theories. So we all know Sigmund Freud's model of the psyche, the id, ego, the superego. So this model suggests that identity is shaped by unconscious drives, and the model um, suggests that while we have like these unconscious drives, it can shape our identity in unhealthy ways, and we might not know. So allowing for the integration of these parts into a more balanced self can help with that. Um, the second one being humanistic theories. So this is Carl Rogers, the self-actualization. So this is the process where realizing one's fullest potential. His concept of congruence, which is basically mentions the alignment between how individuals view themselves and how they want to be seen. So, through an empathic and non-judgmental therapeutic relationship, clients are often encouraged to express their authentic selves and align their internal self-concept with their actions and experience, promoting greater authenticity and self-acceptance. Kind of similar to what I was mentioning in my experience is really thinking about how do I want to be seen, and at the same time, like again, how do I view myself when I compare the two. Um, and then we have social and cultural theories. So the first one being intersectionality by Kimberly Crenshaw. So this explores how multiple social identities, whether it's race, gender, class, sexuality, how they all intersect and contribute to this unique experience of privilege or even oppression that they experience. This is important to explore with clients because oftentimes these are things also that our people don't really think about. Um, and then we have the social identity theory by Henry Tatchfield. So this suggests that individuals derive a sense of self from groups they belong to. So whether that's nationality, ethnicity, gender, oftentimes we like to kind of what's the word I'm trying to say? We feel more accepted whenever we're with the, like for example for me, I actually feel more comfortable when I'm like around people from my own country because I feel like they are more understanding and can understand the little things that maybe others can't understand. Um, so identity work again, it involves unpacking these social, cultural, and historical forces that shape a client's identity, such as discrimination or societal expectations. Um, Again, bringing in my own example. So I often felt like I was expected to, I guess, drink alcohol and be this person that I never felt like I was before, but I felt like I was expected to do this because it was the only way I can blend in with people. Um, and then the last one being those the postmodern theories. So this is Michael Foucault. I hope I pronounced that right. And the fluid nature of identity. So this postmodern thought is that identities are constantly evolving. They're not rigid or static. They're constructed through language, culture, and social interactions. So Foucault actually argued that societal norms dictate how we view ourselves and others, and therapy can actually deconstruct these socially constructed identities. So rather than kind of um, kind of going with the flow, I guess we could kind of challenge that thought and say, hey, like therapy can embrace these multiple identities that I have, and they do evolve over time. They're not just um, this one set in stone thing. Okay. And then for techniques. So the first one being narrative therapy. So the core idea is that clients' identities are shaped by the stories they tell about themselves. Oftentimes, when clients go through a traumatic event, the way they kind of explain these traumatic events is can be um, explained through somebody else's point of view. So a technique can be reauthoring life stories to align with the preferred identity. So taking control of like these stories and saying what actually happened, and externalizing the problem, saying something like you are not the problem. Something occurred that really impacted you to maybe go through that or go through this traumatic experience. Um, and then also exploring dominant and marginalized narratives. So I put this example activity, the life story map. So I just thought this would be something cool to do with clients where they could kind of just draw up all these pivotal events or themes that have occurred in their life, and we could go into it together with the client and explore it, and again trying to reauthor these stories and trying to just change the perspective that they have of themselves. I think narrative therapy is one of those things that can change how they view the traumatic experience that they went through into a more healthier perspective in a way. I think I see Dr. C's hands up. I'm
Yeah,
not
you
sure because
do.
I
Uh,
okay.
and I would imagine parts work lends itself to this because each part tells a different story or can tell a
Yes.
different story of self. And
And
many
this is
times one part dominates. So sometimes the idea of this reauthoring is an idea of shifting from the victim story to the hero story. Same data, and I can look at it different ways. And a different part of me would be authoring that part of the story.
right. And precisely. And oh no, you have your hands up.
So, you know how I am about liberation psychology. How would you address systemic trauma? Because I feel like that would be a good approach, but I'm just kind of curious how would this address systemic trauma to marginalized communities?
Yeah, and so that's actually something that I will go over when I talk about the challenges, because that is something that does come up because sometimes systemic, like you have a lot of issues sometimes of re resurfacing something that's really hard for clients, and so I'll go over that when I get into the challenges, and hopefully I can answer that question for you, Noah. And Dr. C, yep, that's why I put parts work. I think, and Noah, I think you had a great presentation about this as well. But I'll just go over it real quickly. But yeah, parts work definitely does work for identity. So the core idea is that the self comprises of different parts, each with its own perspective and purpose. So again, techniques is identifying and dialoguing with these parts. And I think Dr. C and Dr. Ven, you guys mentioned really important things earlier today about parts work, which I actually wrote down, which is bringing things like, can we get permission from the other parts? Uh, can we ask the parts what it needs or what it wants to hear? So this is something that can help with dialoguing these parts. And again, the goal is to foster this harmony among the parts so we can access what it is our core self. Um, so techniques involve guided imagery, role playing, scene work, right? That's something that we like to do. And I actually put up this pie chart, I guess we could call it. I think just for clients who are visual learners, I think this would be really helpful just to kind of show them this image and just showing them, we do have these different parts. And if we kind of um, somehow create a healthy dialogue between these parts, that's how we could access that, um, you know, our unique core selves that sometimes is really hard to access because we are always wanting to put out the fire or always wanting to protect ourselves. So it's hard sometimes to focus on what we actually want to again be our truest selves. Um,
I would call that how we want to walk the world.
how we want to walk the world, yeah. Um, or which part of us we would like to drive the bus.
Right. There you go.
So, so the other one I have is intersectionality and social identity. So again, I talked about this with the frameworks that was brought up. So just recognizing how the overlapping social identities affect experience and self-concept. Um, again, exploring privilege and marginalization, and encouraging clients to reflect on how their identities influence their worldview. So I actually found this great tool called Social Identity Wheel. Um, this is what it looks like. So going through this with the client can also be beneficial. So you have the core internal dimensions, and then you have the secondary external dimensions. And I just put this as examples of what you can put in each one of those blanks. So whether it's, age, romantic sexual orientation, gender, all of these impact how we view the world or how we view ourselves. Um, and I get the important piece with this activity is those reflection questions that come afterwards. So asking questions like, what identities are you most aware of or think about most? Or the other side of that, which identities are you least aware of? And actually, number four is something that I feel like it can be very powerful, which is which identities have the most impact on you and how you perceive yourself. I can see how, someone who has some a sexual orientation that maybe is not being accepted by a family or something like that, that can be a major part of their life that, they're struggling with, but might not be aware of. And so, kind of looking at how also they overlap with other identities is also really important. So again, allowing the clients just to freely, fill this out as much as they can, and then kind of going through the reflection questions can help them really start to again access that core self and um, uh,
What's this wheel called again?
social identity wheel.
Social identity wheel. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Um, what did I want to say? Yeah, so it's just essentially trying to get them to really understand just all these different parts of ourselves. So it's not we don't only have like um, there's things like citizenship, for example. Like we don't even sometimes think about that, or um, the caretaker role. If we are having this role as a caretaker, or Who are we? Are we a son? Are we a father? Are we a brother? Like, and all of these different roles that we're taking in life, how are they impacting us? How do we perceive ourselves in these different roles? Okay. Now going through the challenges. So, I actually want to throw this out there for people who also have additional ideas, but this is something that, again, what Noah mentioned as well. So, the first one being navigating client resistance. So clients may resist exploring certain aspects of their identity due to fear, shame, or societal conditioning. Something that they never done before, so they might have a fear of doing so. And so, the I have some ideas, and again, if people have more, I'd be happy to hear. But for the first one, I wrote so just fostering a non-judgmental space just to build that trust, and just using a gentle approach to respect the client's readiness to engage. So if we feel like that client is not ready to explore these certain aspects of themselves, then that's okay. We can always try to gradually get there as slow or in a pace that the clients would like to be, because we don't want to have the clients be re-traumatized while they're trying to uncover these um, difficult, I guess, aspects of their identity. um, Second one being balancing depth with emotional safety. So this is where sometimes, I've experienced this where, I would want to kind of go into deeper with the client, but at the same time, I worry about um, what if something might come up where the clients may feel overwhelmed. So that balance is really important because we don't want to kind of stay very surface level, and at the same time, we don't want to be deeply involved to where they are again being re-traumatized. And for this, I think it's important to just balancing reflection with grounding exercises, checking in regularly to ensure that the clients is feeling supported, and not again being re-traumatized. And again, like I mentioned before, just gradually exploring difficult topics. Just slowly having them just while checking in, see how they're feeling, gradually explore these different aspects of themselves. And then last one, managing conflicting identities. So Noah, would this be something that you were asking about? So maybe clients struggling with conflicting identities, such as cultural expectations versus personal desires. So it could be like um, an example is a client navigating LGBTQ identity with a conservative family structure. Um, this was something that can come up, and I think that helping clients explore how these identities coexist, so the similar to my experience, and creating a space for self-compassion and integration. So providing those tools for decision making can be helpful, and how they can also navigate difficult relationships. So whether that's communication skills or um, things as such, I think that can help sometimes with these conflicting identities, um, because it is hard, when you have one side of something, it's a personal desire, but at the same time, this personal desire goes against the cultural expectation. So what do we do there? And that's when we need to kind of foster better, I'd say, yeah, better communication, and encouraging them that they can coexist, and there's just tools that we do need to learn to make sure that they can coexist in a healthy way.
I imagine acceptance generating with the parts work with redecision that I do, the idea of bringing home or accepting parts of self that may have been externalized or rejected. Uh, Much of this is work on accepting that I have these parts. They have different aspects, and they're all okay. It's okay for them to be here. Uh, I'm imagining many folks uh, uh, have a difficult time with parts of self uh, that get them in trouble or make them othered or in some way uh, ostracizes them from other parts of their life they want to be in. It's hard to accept those parts generally. So
Yeah.
I could see a lot of dialogue with parts of self here is necessary for the self-acceptance of moving forward in a life that I am actually composed of many different parts.
Mhm. Yep. Some act work, some again accepting those different parts is definitely beneficial here. Noah, I see your hand up.
Oh, I got a lot to say with this, but I one key question that I would even be asking, kind of bouncing off what Dr. Matthew is saying, though, but like really asking them to define what their own expectations are, because as marginalized groups are, there's a set expectation there, which also can reinforce stigma. So I'm wondering, asking that question, it's like, well, what is your expectation? But also keeping it within reason to where,
Mhm.
they're not going to go and get in trouble either. So that was just something that came up to mind when I'm thinking about conflicting identities, because we all want. There's a big question of authenticity. How do we live our authentic self when there's this whole societal expectation that's put onto us, but also in a sense kind of conflicts us to compromise our values. So like
Yep.
really just finding that balance of like, okay, how can I be authentic when there is an expectation that is placed onto me? So
Yeah.
I often ask my clients like, well, if you had to live in a world where you could define what your expectation, which is reasonable, what would it be? Which
Yeah.
usually they never can really answer that question. And that usually goes into more work that needs to be done. So it was just something I wanted to throw out there.
Yeah, that's a great point, Noah. So not like other people's expectations, and then what are our own expectations as well. So exploring those two is definitely important because sometimes when clients might talk about their own expectations, but they're really coming from other people. So just really trying to, for them to really understand or get their truest authenticity is to identify their expectations that are coming from their own selves. And trying not to have society kind of in a way influence that, because oftentimes reality, like I think Dr. Venn mentioned this earlier, reality demands us to act a certain way or be a certain way, and so the more we want, the more we access that authenticity, the more problematic it may be perceived. So it's definitely hard to do, and that's why I think therapy is really important, and why identity work I think is can be helpful in this situation. Dr. Venn.
Yes, thank you. I heard my name spoken, so I felt I should. One of the goals for me in doing therapy with people, a general goal, I respect their own goals, of course, but I bring in some of my own goals, and one of them is that the person develop the flexibility to adapt to life moment by moment, because life comes at us moment by moment. We find ourselves in situations often unexpected, and it's good to have the equipment to adapt.
Yeah.
Another general goal is that a person love all their parts and get to know their parts and love them because they're all lovable. So those are just some of the general goals that I bring with me into therapy.
I
Yeah,
would
and
add,
then that's another thing. Go
go
ahead,
ahead.
Dr. C. Sorry.
Okay.
I was
I
just
would add that a goal is also not only love them, but also recognize each has its purpose. And uh, and in knowing those purposes and knowing I love them, uh, some part of me needs to decide how I'm going to thread that needle of expressing self and existing in a society. That's always a dichotomy of parts of me want to be myself, by golly, and part of me wants to belong.
Hmm.
And helping our clients resolve that moment to moment based on what my parts are saying is seems to be the work.
Yeah, yeah. And I was going to add that oftentimes clients are scared of change. And that's something that, you know, we do need to kind of encourage people to understand is that we do change over time and we adapt, and that is okay if we do that, you know. And um, yeah, I just wanted to add that actually. Okay. So ethical considerations. We these are just things that I thought that maybe would be important just to look out for. First one being cultural sensitivity and competence. So um, a therapist must be culturally aware and avoid imposing their own values or biases onto the client. So obviously, this is really important. And that's why I believe educating oneself about the client's culture, religion, social background can be really important here because we don't want to, impose our own values onto the clients. And so just acknowledging and respect the influence of that of clients' culture identity and on their experiences and choices that they make in life is important. Um, Second one being avoiding pathologizing or stereotyping. So it is crucial to avoid framing aspects of a client's identity as problematic or abnormal unless they do pose harm to the client or others. Um, we want to normalize their diverse experience. This is stuff that we don't, go through, but they do, and so we need to understand that that's normal for them, and it might not be normal for us, but that's okay. Um, Particularly for those, in the marginalized groups. Um, And the third one, maintaining boundaries and self-disclosure. So me personally, I love self-disclosure. I sometimes think that it could be very beneficial to relate with clients, but there has to be some sort of, I guess there's a fine line to where how much we want to self-disclose. So we must avoid over-identifying or sharing personal experiences in a way that shifts the focus away from the client. Um, so we could use self-disclosure, but only when it obviously serves the client, uh, serves the client's therapeutic goals. We could reflect on the potential impact of our own personal biases on the client therapist dynamic. Um, you know, we could use supervision. We could talk about, this is how we're feeling during this session, and sometimes, at least for me, I realize sometimes my personal biases do come out in sessions. And when I do have the conversations with someone else, I do notice it and I try to just, keep it in the back of my head to make sure I'm aware of it. Um, and then the last one being just addressing power dynamics. So clients will listen to us. They will listen to everything we say to them. So we must recognize that we have the power in the room and just avoid inadvertent, oh my God, inadvertently steering the client's identity exploration. So we want to make sure that we're facilitating a collaborative approach and not just, again, bringing things in the room just from our own values and our own understandings, and just avoid making assumptions about the right or authentic way for a client to express their identity. Um, Clients are, they have the knowledge, they have the ability to do this, but obviously a collaborative approach is really important in doing so. And that's it. Any questions? Yeah, Dr. Ben.
Very good job, Sammy. Excellent
Thank you.
presentation.
Thank you so much.
I absolutely agree. I learned a lot. Thank you. So I guess this is it, dudes. Um, I will see people in their normal scheduled time, except for Noah this week, and then I won't see you for a while. So be well.
Thank you, Dr. C, and happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Thank you. You all.
Thank you, Sammy. Happy
Bye bye.
Thanksgiving.